When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can be confusing. Like Swedish techno confusing.
Bark, bark, meow, meow. Dance with me, purple cow. Bark, bark, meow, meow. Ooh, you lovely cow.
Geico makes it easy. With 24/7 access, all you have to do is go to Geico.com and you could save money on car insurance. It just makes sense. Unlike,
Dance with me, purple cow. I like your moves.
This is the Cover32 Seahawks Show.
Throw down the middle, dart ball to the 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Seahawks!
With your host, Kevin Daggett.
Cam Chancellor with the big hit. Who else would it be but Cam?
And Lee Vowell.
Intercepted, getting underneath it is Earl Thomas.
Just one step away from CenturyLink Field.
He scrambles upfield, he's hit, he's dropped. Michael Bennett is there to make the sack.
The official podcast of the Cover32 Seahawks website.
Thomas rolls, Greg Xavier Rhodes across the goal line, and the Seahawks are on the board.
Go Hawks.
And welcome to the Cover32 Seahawks Show with Kevin Daggett. And filling in for none other than Lee Val is, guess what? It's his birthday, and someone's calling me right now. This is Ted Hicks from Late Night Parents and co-host of Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue. Yeah, this is my way of saying happy birthday to Lee. Kevin, I think you have a birthday coming up within the next 48 hours, 24 hours, so... before we even get into it, let me follow this wonderful script or outline that Lee has left for me. Because Late Night Parents, I'm telling you, I go off script like Donald Trump. But that's another thing. Hey, you can hear the show. You can hear the show live on the Happy Hour Network and on this podcast and on the podcast at Cover32.com. Of course, iHeart and iTunes. Today, our guest will be Bob Candata, who covers the Seahawks for the Seattle Times, McGregor Wells of SB's Nation's New York Jets site, Gangrene Nation, and of course, our weekly segment with Tim Weaver, managing editor of the Cover32 Seahawks site. This week, Tim will be looking back at Week 3 and ahead to Week 4 because you're going up against Gangrene, Jets, Jets. Kevin, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm just enjoying the cool fall weather for a change.
Oh, it's good. That's good. Yeah, weather is good. Weather is nice also in New York. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would truthfully, I would hope it would get a little cold just for this weekend and freeze you guys out. But Kev, I guess you're going to give us a recap of this past, Game 3, Week 3, your Hawks against the 49ers.
Well, I think the Hawks had a pretty good showing against the 49ers, and, of course, who knows if it was the Hawks playing well or the 49ers not playing well because we all know the 49ers are not a real good football team, despite doing what they did to the Rams, and but I'm not sure the 49ers are all that good of a team. Seahawks did play well. The defense, the offensive line did show up. They seemed to give Russell Wilson quite a bit of protection. He looked a little better on that injured ankle, but the offensive line seemed to play a lot better. And again, I don't know how good the line is. I know they're not real good, but the 49ers defensive line is not that good. But hey, it's good to have a win, that kind of a win going into this week, especially because I don't think this is going to be an easy trip out east for an early game against your Jets.
Well, like I tell you, it probably would be the best time with the egg that we threw up. When I mean we, the New York Jets, I mean, I kind of think there's a reason, there's a method to the madness why Lee wanted me to co-host this week's show. I mean, I understand it's his birthday and your birthday is coming up, and no, the Seahawks are not going to give you a birthday present with a W, but the Jets were just god-awful. I mean, and we're going to get into it with McGregor Wells of the SB Nation, Jets Gangrene Nation site very shortly, but they were just god-awful. And you know, for the most part, you could talk about the overall play of the Jets, but everyone's going to focus on Ryan Fitzpatrick. On days like this past Sunday, I affectionately call him Fitz-tragic. That's how it felt like watching that game and watching all those tip balls. I don't know. I mean, Kevin, and you've been a football fan, I'm guessing, many, many, many years. The tip ball itself, should that count as a full interception or not? I mean, I'm kind of thinking about the NHL type rules where, you know, you got an assist or half an assist or stuff like that.
You know, I've been saying for a long time, it's one thing if the quarterback throws the ball and it gets picked off. You know, if the guy runs in front of your receiver and picks it off, or if he overthrows him. But but I don't know what you call it. But I don't know that is, if it's a tip ball or if, you know, the guy catches the ball, turns, and hits and bounces out of his hands, and the other guy catches it. I don't know that that's necessarily the quarterback's fault, but it gets tacked up against the quarterback as an interception. You know, and I don't know. I've talked about it with my wife, and it's doing games, and it's like, you know, what is that really the quarterback's fault, or is that the receiver's fault? I mean, what do you do with that? That's a good question.
Yeah, but regardless, there were so many errant passes from. I mean, if I was a Seahawks fan, and here's the full disclosure, I do actually own a Russell Wilson jersey. So, am I a Seahawks fan or am I a Russell Wilson fan? I mean, I'm one of those homers where I'll get a jersey on a specific team because I like the specific, you know, the specific player. But if I was a Seahawks fan and or, you know, played with the Seahawks or was, you know, on the coaching staff, after watching the highlights from last week with the Jets-Chiefs game, I'm licking my chops about coming into MetLife.
Especially the way that because the Seattle defense they've got one turnover so far. The interception technically an interception by Bobby Wagner this last weekend, but I guarantee you they are licking their chops because they know that team's known for causing turnovers, and they just haven't done that this year. And I'm sure they're looking at you know, Fitzpatrick had a bad day, and, you know, the whole team had a bad day. Will they have two in a row? I don't know. I mean, just like Earl Thomas 2 weeks ago had the worst game of his career. Arm tackles, whiffs, missed arm tackles and whiffs. Is Fitzpatrick going to have that kind of day again? I wouldn't count on it, but you're right. I'll guarantee you that defense is going to be ready.
I'll put it this way: Legion of Boom is always ready. I mean, from what I've seen on them on TV. But hey, just getting back to the Seahawks and Niners, that game. I mean, I'm not sure what else to expect out of the Niners. I really don't. I mean, I don't know about you. I really don't expect them to be that good this season. And no. I mean, the most we're hearing about them is, you know, of course, with the protest that's happening with Colin Kaepernick. But overall, I'm not hearing anything, and maybe that's because I'm on the East Coast or something like that. But hey, I do have to ask you a question. How worried are you about Russell Wilson's sprained MCL and Thomas Rawls' fibular injury?
I am more concerned about Russell Wilson's MCL than I am about Rawls' injury, because Christian Michael's having a pretty good season so far. Is it a Pro Bowl season? No, it's not. But he's getting better. He's gotten better since he came back to the team. 126 yards. this year. This game, I think he's averaging over 80 yards a game. Rawls will come back, and one of Lee and I've talked about this before with Rawls and Paul Richardson. Paul Richardson has a tendency to be injury prone now. Is Rawls going to be the same way? Certainly hope not, but here we go again. He's injured again, and a little more serious than they thought in the beginning, and he's going to be out for a little while. Russell Wilson, I'm more concerned about Russell Wilson hurting himself more because he wanted to get back in that game on Sunday, put a knee brace on, stood on the sidelines, put me back in the game, coach, when they were up by 30 points, and it's like, what are you doing, dude? Sit down and take a break. I mean, we need you to rest. We need you for the rest of the season. But he's such a competitor. I'm afraid he may get out there and play on an injury that he shouldn't be playing on and end up being more serious. And I'm just not sure this team can survive with Trevon Boykin as a quarterback.
I mean, that's when we have to use our common sense. And thankfully, you've got one of the greats with Pete Carroll as your head coach. You got to think about it. Russell Wilson is what, $88 million asset or $100 million asset? Come on. You can't be thinking about getting back into, especially when it's like garbage time. It's like, why?
Exactly. That's why I'm glad they kept him out of the game, but because it was unnecessary. And it gives Boykin some experience in there. I mean, he had to have some jitters going in there, and it can't hurt to have him in there playing because we might need him to win a game for us down the road.
Hey, I do want to throw a little bit of fantasy in here. I know this is kind of off the cuff a little bit, and yes, this is your Seahawks show, Cover32 Seahawks Show. Lee's not here, so Ted does a lot of things off the cuff just for this week. I got to tell you, what's your take? So on any of your fantasy leagues that you're in, Tim, tell me, do you have Jimmy Graham? Because I have him in one of my leagues, and my main problem is, from a fantasy perspective, is he's not the stud that he was when he's with the Saints. And you really don't know what you're going to get with him. I mean, this past week he got about 20 to 22 points, but what's your take on that?
Well, I hate fantasy football. I've played it one time, and I won the league I was in, but it just completely stressed me out because I'm so darn competitive. I just want to watch these individual athletes, and I can't watch and enjoy the game. And I like to sit back and just watch the game, and so I got asked to do 3 different leagues this year, and I just can't do it. But as far as Jimmy Graham goes, he's I've kind of gone back and forth on whether after when they made the trade, I was like, great, Jimmy Graham, great, but I had really forgot how valuable Max Unger was and how much of an anchor he was on that offensive line until we didn't have him. And then I thought, Jimmy Graham's really not doing much, and our offensive line stinks. Boy, maybe that wasn't such a good trade after all. Maybe we should wish we had Max Unger back. And then Graham went down. They started playing well, and I was like, well, maybe they were just trying to force the ball to Jimmy Graham too much. And this year the offensive line stinks, and but Graham seems to be coming around. They seem to be putting him in the offense. They put him out at wide receiver a couple times. They don't seem to. I think Wilson last year was forcing the ball to him. It doesn't seem to be forcing the ball to him. He throws it to him when he's open. We'll go through his progressions, and I think they're trying to figure out how to fit Jimmy Graham into the offense for what his strengths are, as opposed to what they want his strengths to be. So hopefully he'll come around. Hopefully he can stay healthy too.
That's true, Kevin. Because here's another thing. Like I said, Jimmy Graham, when he was going through his contract situation with the Saints, I was hoping that somehow he would get traded to the Jets. And I, it was just, I know, wishful thinking, whatever you want to call it. But that's the way I kind of felt, where he's the type of asset that, you remember a couple of years ago that the discussion was whether, should he be paid as a wide receiver, but he's really a tight end, those type of discussions. And like to come to the Seahawks, and I'm like, I'm not really seeing this guy really. I mean, I understand last year he was hurt, but we really haven't seen his potential. Using him as a blocker, using him for his blocking. I mean, he's a player, and like I said, I'm not your usual co-host on here, but he was the type of player that you really didn't expect him to get too physical. He's one of those players you throw the ball up, and he's going to grab it, and he's going to chew up, a ton of yards after the catch. And, of course, in the fantasy world, he's going to get you a ton of points at the same time. But I was a little skeptic when he did get traded to the team, and, the Seahawks gave up the assets that they did give up. And I was like, how are they going to use him? Because I'm kind of thinking back to, and I think he's out of the league now. Remember when Percy Harvin came to Seattle?
Oh, and I remember that.
Yeah, the real question is, how do you use someone like that? And it just didn't pan out. So I'm interested. I'm going to be watching this weekend, and of course whenever I get to check out the Seahawks, my eyes are on Jimmy Graham. Of course, the great Doug Baldwin. He's I think it was, when was it? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he was called a pedestrian receiver.
Yep.
I mean,
yep.
They're really chewing on those words. This guy just shows up. He just shows up and catches touchdowns, and jeez, I don't know.
Yeah, they were talking on during the game that he catches 80% of what's thrown to him.
Yes.
And that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's utterly crazy. I will also share with you. So I'm in 2 leagues this year. I had to limit it down. At one point, I was in 4 fantasy football leagues. I'm in 2, and I picked up Christian Michael Saturday night. He was available in my in the Yahoo League, and I mean this guy he just delivered. He just delivered on Sunday. Was that a career game for him or what?
I think so, and he really has. I mean, G. Scott on the ESPN 710 in Seattle said during the preseason and during training camp that Christian Michael he's going to be the guy. And Lee and I are like, what? Christian Michael really the guy that was on 4 different teams last year, I think, and he's going to be the guy. And sure enough, I mean he can move laterally, he can move north and south, and he seems to be holding on to the ball and increased his fundamentals. And I mean, he's doing a serviceable job. I mean, he wasn't slotted to be the starting running back, but that's kind of where he is now. So yeah, he's doing a good job.
So I do have, like I said, this is fun for me because you get to see my Homerville, because I love this podcast. I love listening to the podcast. Love listening to you guys rant in it, each week. Even though it's been said on several occasions that he's not coming back, that he's done, all the above, we could see, I mean, is there, without a shadow of a doubt in your mind, could we see Beast Mode this year?
You know what? I would not put anything past that guy because, some of the stuff that he's done in the got some background noise going on. But I wouldn't. I'm not going to say 100% no, we're not going to see him again. I don't think so. I wouldn't. It doesn't really seem that plausible, but who knows? I mean, somebody started a rumor a couple weeks ago that he was coming back, and he pretty much quashed that right off the bat. But I think he might be pretty. I think he's pretty busy with his beast mode store. I think he just opened one up in Seattle. So.
Oh my goodness! I could see someone like him, just like, hey, I'm happy with what I'm doing right now. Leave me alone. Are you guys? Is this good enough for you guys? Those are the only sound bites I hear from him, and I'm like, why do I have a feeling if someone goes down, this guy is going to put the gear back on and be out there refreshed? I don't know.
Well, I've got my beast mode fat head on the wall in my garage, so I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go at a moment's notice with beast mode.
Oh my goodness. Well, we were waiting for our first scheduled guest. We were waiting for our first scheduled guest. It seems like I just want to make sure Blog Talk isn't acting crazy. I hope that's not the case, because we were waiting for McGregor Wells of SB Nation's Gangrene Nation to join so I can rip him about the Jets, especially, being 1-2 and just like I said, when you don't, let's put it this way, Kevin, from what I've seen of Ryan Fitzpatrick being here in New York, a pretty serviceable quarterback. He's got a ton of weapons around him. And let's see. Oh no, McGregor is scheduled. Okay, so we're doing just fine because McGregor is scheduled in the next 10 minutes. Okay, so just want to make sure. He's got a ton of weapons around him like he's never had before in his life. And it's just like I said, it was just painful watching Sunday's game because the week prior when they were on Thursday Night Football, I don't know if it was Thursday Night Football or Monday Night. No, it was Thursday Night Football. They were on against the Bills with those horrible. What are those uniforms called? The color.
Oh yeah, what
color rush?
Yeah.
Color rush type uniform that I was expecting. You expect. I guess it's nice for you to expect if there's going to be 25 to 30 points a game, but I think our guest is in the queue. I'm going to bring him on. McGregor, how you doing?
Not McGregor. This is Tim. I've jumped the queue. I've jumped my place in line. I'm taking.
Okay. Got you.
Editor's prerogative.
Got you. Well, we'll put you right back in the queue, and I think. Wait, hang on. Okay, so Tim, you're calling in now. Thanks so much for calling in. I am. Of course, Kevin. I am co-hosting for this week because Lee's birthday. So this train wreck is on me, but I want to say welcome once again to the show, and I believe you're going to give your emphasis on what's happening. But we want to welcome you to the show because you're the editor of Cover32 Seahawks Show and your weekly segment during our football season. So what's going on this week? How are you doing?
Thanks for asking. I've been doing better, to be perfectly honest. Seahawks got a win. It was a big win. They really struggled the first two games, Miami and Los Angeles. Well, they ended up pulling one out week one. To be perfectly honest, they have not played well so far this year. You may remember early in that Miami game, Kenny Stills drops this pass. He's wide open. Earl Thomas got lost deep. This never happens, 1 in a million kind of play. And Kenny Stills gets hit in stride by Ryan Tannehill, drops it. That's easily 6 points on the board there, 7. You must assume they're going to make the extra point. Dolphins could have won that game, so we could be looking at 0-2 going into the Niners game, and that's just a really tough hole to come out of. If you remember last year, they started out 0-2, and that's pretty tough to go to the playoffs. I believe only 12% of teams who start out 0-2 wind up going to the postseason. So they really needed that win. And to be 2-1 right now, based on what's happened so far, with the offensive line just being a total garbage dumpster fire, and Russell Wilson being banged up, I think you have to feel really good about being 2-1, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Tim. And what was your reaction when the Hawks started off that first drive, just bang bang? Next thing you know, Christian Michael's got his first touchdown of his career. What was your reaction to that?
I called it. I didn't want to go totally overboard because remember, for some reason, Christian Michael, as amazing as he's been, he had no touchdowns coming into this week. He's averaging like 5 yards a carry. All the ability is there, this athleticism, the ability to get around a defense and his burst, but no touchdowns. And I wanted to say I think he's going to get 2 this week. I only said he's going to get his first one. I wish I'd gone all the way with my prediction, but you have to feel really good for him. And the way that the team talks about him now, it's such a 180 than it was the last few years, because it's so frustrating to see a guy who has all the natural ability in the world. I think Christian Michael may be a better pure athlete than Marshawn Lynch. He may be the best pure athlete on this team, and that's saying something because that's what Pete Carroll and John Schneider have kind of prided themselves on. They take athletes, they find them in the 5th round and the 7th round, or they go undrafted like some guys, and they come out and make superstars out of them. So Michael, with his athleticism, you knew he had some potential to be a real star here. But he really didn't show it much until late last year, and now he's finally at that level where he's among the elites of the running backs in the league. I just read this before coming on Pro Football Focus right now. They have him ranked number 3 in the NFL, so that's really cool to see after all this time.
Dang, that is good, especially when we got Thomas Rawls off, although he's injured. We still know how good he can be based on last year. Now, obviously, the Seahawks, they put up a lot of points this last game, but was that a matter of the Seahawks playing really well or just that the 49ers kind of stink?
It was a bit of both, to be sure. Coming into this year, I thought the 49ers would be a 4-12 team. I was less sure of that after they crushed the Rams week 1, but I don't think the Rams are very good either. So I thought it was really embarrassing for a lot of the stretch of that game. Remember, the first 3 points they scored, it was after Jimmy Graham's fumble, so they got a short field position. They got 3 points there. Then they didn't score again until garbage time. Carlos Hyde scored 2 touchdowns. I'm not sure what exactly happened with the defense late in the game. Maybe they're playing a little bit too much prevent. They look a little bit frustrated. Maybe they got bored because the outcome had been decided so long before. I think it was pretty much over early in the third quarter. But they didn't get anything going at all offensively in that game until very late. And they can't pressure the Seahawks the way that the other teams do. What you need to do to be able to beat Seattle, you have to get pressure on Wilson. And the Jets and the Dolphins and the Rams all have very good defensive lines. The Niners simply they don't have the depth they used to. A few years ago, that was like a big problem. That's why they beat the Seahawks a good 4 or 5 times in a row. Until Russell Wilson came that year, things started to change. But they would just consistently kill us because they had Justin Smith in there, they had Aldon Smith, they had all these great pass rushers, and they just keep coming after you. But now the dynamic has changed. They don't have those heavy hitters up front anymore. They're not really a threat. And I don't know why Kaepernick's on the bench. Maybe you guys have an idea about that. I don't know if his political thing is part of it. There's obviously a good reason why you'd want Kaepernick on the bench. He had a really bad run last year before they benched him. He throws way too many picks. He's just not progressing the way you'd expect a quarterback to with his ability. But I have such a hard time believing that he's not better than Blaine Gabbert,
That is true. I keep hearing that Chip Kelly keeps saying he's not ready yet, but I'm not really sure what that means to him.
I think he had a problem with his shoulder this off season. He wasn't very active in training camp, didn't see much action in preseason, so they didn't really have much of a choice. But I was surprised they didn't draft a quarterback. I mean, coming into the season, if Blaine Gabbert's going to be your starter and Colin Kaepernick's backing up, like, hey, you might want to at least take a fifth rounder and say maybe we'll hit on somebody. Maybe that's what the Cowboys ended up doing. They didn't get who they wanted early on. I think they're looking at Carson Wentz themselves. They wind up getting Ezekiel Elliott. But in the fourth round, look, they got Dak Prescott, and he's amazing. When you don't have a quality starter at quarterback, you're going to have a really tough time getting above 500 in the NFL, and I think that's where they're stuck right now.
So, Tim, the defense, again, was stellar. What are the 3 to 4 best defenses in the league right now, and where would you rank the Seahawks in that mix?
Seahawks are right up there with the Vikings. I think that's about an even they're two very different defenses, which is funny because the Vikings are getting all these turnovers. Like mentioned earlier, they've only gotten 1 turnover so far. They got Bobby Wagner's pick, which is kind of fortunate. The Vikings, I think they sacked Cam Newton 8 times on Sunday, and they made him throw 3 picks. The week before that, they made Aaron Rodgers look just terrible. So I've been really impressed by the Vikings defense so far. I'm glad we have another fantasy fanatic going here. I've got the Vikings on my team. I went out of my way to get them, knowing their defense was going to be pretty special. And they also got a really great returner in Cordell Patterson. Marcus Sherrill's not bad either. So they're just really, really stacked on defense and special teams. So I think it's the Seahawks and the Vikings. The Patriots, you have to recognize, are playing amazing. I'm so frustrated by that. I can't believe they're 3-0 without Tom Brady. Rob Gronkowski, I think, has played maybe, 5 snaps. He had 12 yards, and they're 3-0 without their 2 best players, and they could go 4-0 now, even though we don't know who's going to play a quarterback. It's stunning. So those 3, I think you guys say, are among the elites right now as far as top defenses go.
Gotcha. Hey, Tim, we have a log jam in the queue right now. We also have our Jets expert from SB Nation also in the queue. I'm like, I think this is a great time, and I never get this on my podcast.
Good. Well, I'll get out of the way. I'm glad that we've got it going now.
So big question: are you going to come back after this to give us the who wins and why, or do you want to give that to us right now?
I'll get back to you guys a little bit later on the show. Let's bring in our guest.
Thanks so much, Tim. All right, and that was part 1 of our discussion with Tim Weaver, editor of the Cover32 Seahawks site.
He deserves to be on twice.
But I want to welcome McGregor Wells, who's been in the queue waiting patiently. McGregor Wells of the SB Nation's Jet site, Gangrene Nation. We want to welcome McGregor to the show. He's the managing editor of Gangrene Nation. McGregor, thanks for being on, and I want to let you know I am a Jets fan, and yes, I live in Long Island. How are you doing?
That's great. I'm happy to talk to a fellow Jets fan. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I guess, Tim, you can start off this discussion.
Hey, McGregor, before we get into talk specifically about the Jets Seahawks coming up, talk a little bit about the season so far for the Jets. And, Fitzpatrick had most likely the worst game of his life on Sunday, and I have the NFL Sunday Ticket, which, by the way, is the greatest invention after football, and so I can watch any game I want. And I'm sitting there with my wife and watching that game, and we see 6 interceptions. My wife goes, "I thought they got rid of Mark Sanchez."
Sanchez never had 6, He only went up to 5.
Oh, goodness.
So how much faith do you and the Jets fan have in him going forward this season?
Well, the Jets seem to still have faith in him. They say there's no question at all he's the quarterback going forward. I've never had a whole lot of faith in Fitzpatrick. The problem is who else do we have on the roster that's any better? The Fitzpatrick is what he is. He's a journeyman quarterback. He's always been turnover prone. He had a very nice year last year because he had much better weapons than he's ever had in his career. But you can't go in expecting Fitzpatrick to carry you as a team. If you do, it's a recipe for failure. He's a stopgap. He's a journeyman, and he's going to throw in some real stinkers at times.
Now, on a positive note, the defensive line for the Jets is a pretty strong defense. What do you think about the defensive unit so far this year?
Oh, another disappointment. The defensive line is very good. Those three studs they have on the defensive line are excellent. The rest of the defense looks like nobody can cover anybody. Darrelle Revis looks like, it's only 3 games in. We don't want to overreact, but up to now, he just doesn't look like the same guy anymore. He looks sort of like a middle-of-the-pack kind of cornerback at this point, and there's really no other cornerback on this team that excites you. The safety has been horrendous so far in coverage. The Jets are averaging close to 300 yards a game in passing given up, I think. It's not been what you expected from this Jets defense. People were talking about this Jets defense as it was going to be something special this year, and so far it has not been anything but.
Hey, McGregor, I'm going to go a little bit off script here because it's great to have someone from, who's a Jet fan just like myself. Tim, you got to sit on the sideline for this one. But if you were Todd Bowles last week, at what point, and the question I'm going to ask you, at what point would you have yanked Ryan Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult question because you have the game was still within reach, and you have a Geno Smith sitting on the bench who is going to come in totally cold, who did not look good at all in the preseason, and you're thinking, still, who gives us a better chance to win? Sure, in the last 4 minutes when the game was over, you could have brought Geno in, but before that, are you really thinking Geno Smith cold off the bench is better than Fitzpatrick, even as bad as Fitzpatrick was playing? I'm not so sure about that. So, it was a tough – look, if you had 4 interceptions, after the first play of the second half, at that point you say, okay, let's see what we can do to change things up. But a lot of those interceptions came late, and he just, at that point it was out of reach, but it wasn't out of reach for a very long time. They were still in the game with 6 minutes left. And I'm still thinking, if Fitzpatrick can put one good drive together, we're right back in this. So it was an awful performance, but I'm not sure at any point in that game you thought, well, now is a great time to put Geno in. How about you?
There's no way. No way I'm touching Geno on this one. No way I'm going to give any of those, whether it's the Daily News, Post, Newsday, New York Times. No way I'm going to give them back page headlines with Fitz on the bench and Geno lights it up. You can't have that, especially at the $12 million contract this guy's getting paid this year. My question for you is, overall, just to shift gears a bit, overall, where are the Jets after week 3 compared to what you expected before the season, and why? Because they've got a killer schedule.
As far as their record is concerned, they're pretty much where I thought they'd be. I thought they'd lose to the Bengals, and I thought they'd lose one of the Bills and Chiefs games. So 1 and 2 is not a surprise, and I was right from the beginning of the season. I was thinking 2 and 4, even 1 and 5 is not all that unrealistic for this team. It's just the schedule is brutal for the first 6 or 7 games. After that, it gets a lot easier, and they may go on a run. But they may be out of the playoff contention before the run makes any difference.
It's true. One more question I have to ask you. I'm sorry, Tim, because like I said, I don't get this opportunity too often. At the end of the season, if the play of Darrelle Revis continues, do you see this as a $13 million headache, or do you see this as a move to safety and gracefully you can keep him on the team?
If he plays like he's been playing for the first 3 games, I see him getting cut. He's got a cap hit of, don't take me as this is gospel, something like $15 million next year.
Right.
He's got, I think about 7 of that comes off the cap if they cut him, but he's also got offset language in his contract, which means if some other team signs him, they get to offset the amount they sign him for. So I think they can reasonably expect to get back, $11, $12 million out of this if they cut him. And I don't know that that's not a good option because right now, as we speak, the Jets are actually over the cap for next year. So if he continues this level of play, I see him getting cut.
Gotcha. So, want to move on to Sunday's game versus the Seahawks. It's a home game for New York at MetLife, an early start for the Seahawks. So, technically, it's a 10 a.m. start for the Seahawks. And Fitzpatrick there's no way. I mean, I hate to use the term Fitztragic, but after you throw, people were saying on Twitter, pick six? No, 6 picks. But as bad as he played on Sunday, what are your biggest reasons for optimism heading into Sunday's 1 p.m. Time start?
Boy, you are putting me on the spot with it. I don't have a lot of optimism. The Seahawks are a dominant defense. They are really, really good on defense. And I think they're probably the best defense he may have ever faced in his career. And I don't think I'm exaggerating with that. And coming off of that brutal start against Kansas City, he was not very good against Cincinnati. He was not very good against Buffalo the last game of last year. He's had one good start in the last 4. Now he's playing perhaps the best defense he's ever faced. I don't have a lot of reasons for optimism. I don't think he's going to put up another 6 picks or anything like that, but I don't think the Jets are going to win this game. I think he's going to have a bad performance, maybe, 2 picks and, 150 yards passing, 20 out of 40 or something like that. It's just a guess, but I don't see a lot of reason for optimism against this defense. This is a very good defense.
And before I turn the reins back over to Tim, the flip side to that is, what are your biggest worries about going against the Seattle Seahawks?
The biggest worries are the defense is going to destroy this team. The Seahawks are very good against the run. They're going to force the Jets to go to pass first offense, and I don't think Fitzpatrick is going to do well in that pass first mode. And the only reason we have for optimism in this game overall, I think, is number one, the Seahawks making this cross country trip with that 10 a.m. local starting time for them, and number two is the fact that Russell Wilson's really banged up. If Russell Wilson is not playing or is really hobbled, then the Jets have a good chance in this game. If he's like the usual Russell Wilson, I think this is a very tough game for the Jets to win.
And McGregor, this is Kevin, not Tim, but anyway. So I know you mentioned earlier you wouldn't have been surprised with a 1-5 start, but it's only week 4. How important is this game for the Jets to win?
It's a home game. I mean, the next 2 are on the road against the Steelers and the Cardinals. If they can't get this game, it's a lot harder to get, I think, on the road against the Steelers and Cardinals. This is a crucial game. They got to win this as a home game. They got to take it. 2-4, you can live with that, and then go on a run against the weaker opponents. 1-5. I don't think there's any real chance they have them making the playoffs.
Yeah, well, I'll guarantee you, nobody thought the NFC West top would have the Rams at this time of the season, but that's where we are. The Rams at the top of the NFC West. But so, who wins this game and why?
I think the Seahawks win it. If they don't, it's only because the 2 things I talked about, the tough cross-country trip and the problem with Russell Wilson. What do you think about, is Russell Wilson even going to play this game?
I think he's going to play. I mean, there's obviously kind of keeping it close to the vest, but I think the word right now is that he's going to play. He had an injury, but he's doing some rehab, so.
Is he going to be good? I mean, he's going to be ready to go, or is he going to be a decoy? Because if he's the usual Russell Wilson, I mean, people, I think, really underestimate this guy. This guy is really, really good. I mean, this guy put up something like, you know this better than I do, but I think it was something like 25 touchdown passes in the last 7 games last year. I mean, this guy, it came out in his first few years of his career better than anybody in the history of the sport. And yet they still talk about him as a system quarterback and all this. He's not a system quarterback, and he's not carried by that defense. He is a brilliant quarterback. And if he's full strength, I just think it's a really tough game for the Jets to win this week.
Yeah, the big problem with that is if they put him out there as a decoy and he gets hurt even worse. I mean, that's gonna be a mess for the rest of the season. I don't know that they can afford to do that. But
right.
McGregor, we appreciate you being on, and can you let people know where they can read your stuff and find you on social media?
I would if I had been on social media. I may be on Facebook in the next week or so. Then I'll call you back. All right.
Oh man, that is great, McGregor. We want to thank you for joining us. definitely. It was really, really a pleasure speaking with someone from Gang Green Nation, and I plan to be out there this year, sometime this year. I usually go to about at least two games per year at MetLife. I
hope you're more optimistic about this game than I am, because I'm not feeling good about this one.
I'm not feeling good about it either. I'm not. Well, I mean, I'm not feeling good for like the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Right, exactly.
So, but definitely want to thank you again for joining us, and hope to speak with you very soon.
Great, look forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks again. And McGregor was great.
He was.
I got to tell you that. He was great. I mean, oh my goodness. So I get so excited because I'm talking to Tim, and I'm like, all right, Kevin, wait, McGregor's on. And I'm like, all right, McGregor, now you can speak with Tim. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Hey, I've been called worse.
Oh my goodness. I just, you know what, Tim, it was the fact that I'm speaking with a Jets guy, and I'm like, yeah, because I'm charged up, because I know there's no way we're going to win this game this week. There's no way. I'm sorry.
I hope you're right.
I just don't have faith in Fitz. I don't have faith in Fitz. And it's funny because every other day at where I work during my day job, I go into the mailroom, and in the mailroom are two gentlemen. One is named Roy and one is named Rob. Roy is a Bills fan, so when Fitzpatrick came to the Jets, he was like, "Oh, you can have him." And I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, you'll see." And all last season, things went kind of smooth up until Week 16, or technically Week 17, when the Jets played the Bills, and Fitz became Fitz. And he threw 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter. So I went back to work that Monday, and I said, "Roy, I see what you meant." He was like, I told you, Ted, all along. And I said, oh, my goodness. So that was my education on Ryan Fitzpatrick.
You need to listen to Roy.
Roy from the mailroom, I'm telling you. Roy from the mailroom. So we are very shortly going to have our good friend is going to join us again, Mr. Tim Weaver, because we were having a discussion on his thoughts and his overall emphasis on what's going to happen this week. Tim's going to join us any minute, and then after Tim, Bob Condata of the Seattle Times will be joining us. I guess he's going to be our featured guest. I mean, I've never had so many big timers on a show all in the same night. I know this is what you guys do on a weekly basis. That's why you get so many hits on the internet and downloads from this great podcast.
Lee's connected, man. He's got the contacts. I mean, he's got the Rolodex full of names.
He does. So I'm gonna add Tim back to the show right now. Tim, how you doing?
Here.
Oh, Tim.
The ongoing joke.
The ongoing joke is I got so excited when our Jets expert joined. Instead of calling Kevin, I call Kevin Tim.
Hey, Trump can run the president. Anything is possible. It's all met. Let's just run with it. Who knows?
Oh my goodness.
Oh my.
So let's get to the questioning. I think Kevin, it was in your queue about Pete Carroll.
Well, we have one of the big questions is if you were Tim, if you were Pete Carroll, and do you sit Russell Wilson this week and play Trevon Boykin, or what with his injuries, or what would you do if you were Pete Carroll in that situation with what's going on with him?
But funny enough, I can feel Russell Wilson's pain. I'm having a little like an E.T. Elliott kind of moment here. Yesterday on my run, I hurt my right ankle. I'm not sure what I did. I didn't sprain it. I didn't break anything. It was just kind of sore and kind of stiff. And today, I can barely get from my couch to the freezer where the ice cream is. So I can't imagine like running around with 300-pound man trying to tackle me. Russell Wilson is an incredible athlete, and part of me loves him for wanting to go back in that game. He claims that he just went back out there without the coaches knowing it after he had sprained his MCL. I don't know. If he did, then he got away with it. Good for him, but I would really hate the idea that they would let him back on the field on purpose in that situation. So I don't know who I believe there. I would not play him this week. If you remember last week, I was very skeptical about playing him going into the Niners because I thought they could beat the 49ers without Russell Wilson. And I think that bore out based on what we saw on Sunday. The defense was phenomenal. The only points that the 49ers got were in garbage time. So I think that it would be really much safer to sit Wilson this week. For most human beings, a sprained MCL is 6 weeks recovery where you don't do a whole lot. For Wilson, he's going to go out there in 6 days and try to play against a really good defensive line. I know you're down on the Jets, Dad. I would understand you have every reason to be, but that defensive line is really, really good. Like, they lost Damon Harrison. They don't even miss him. They are stacked up there. Muhammad Wilkerson is just an absolute beast. He's one of these guys who, I think he was on the trade block a little bit this summer. Every team called because you have to call about him. You know, he's just one of those kind of players. So it's a dangerous situation to have. If the offensive line was Dallas, I would feel okay with putting Wilson out there, but it's not Dallas. And they looked good last week against the 49ers, but you have to take that context in there. Niners do not have a good D-line. They can't get after you. It's going to be the same thing we saw in weeks 1 and 2 against the Rams and the Dolphins. They're going to be coming after Wilson, and he risks further injuring himself. That's the thing. I'm a basketball guy myself. I never played much football, but the reason why I would never play with an injury is that you wind up compensating. Like if I were to go out today, I couldn't put my full weight on my right ankle, so then my left leg is going to compensate, and I put more weight there, and then you risk injuring that other leg, and I think that may have been factor for him. If Wilson had been 100%, I don't know if he gets brought down by Eli Harold like that. Maybe they catch him, maybe they don't. Maybe he usually gets out of bounds and can avoid those kind of hits. So they're taking a really big risk by playing him this week, and if it was my call, I wouldn't do it.
Now, sticking with that kind of line of questioning, that obviously, like you said, the defense, the Dolphins and Rams, they struggled against those defensive line. And now, what do you think Bevel's going to do to switch things up and try to have some success on offense against this Jets defense?
I think they need to force feed the ball to Jimmy. I'm really glad to see them getting him involved last week. I don't know what the delay was. I know he hasn't been 100% for a while. He's been recovering from his knee, but he was out there week 1, he was out there week 2, and he wasn't getting targets. They finally got him going, and he delivered with 100 yards and a touchdown. It's not like he forgot how to do it. They just haven't been using him right. Like you mentioned earlier, he should not be on the edge trying to set up running lanes for Christian Michael. That's not what he's good at. He needs to be in the red zone, just catching jump balls, just throw it up there where only he can get it. He's the tallest man on the field pretty much when you play against most teams. Maybe Calais Campbell, maybe there's a few guys who are bigger than him, but he's usually going to be the biggest guy on the field. So you need to use that weapon. I think it's time for them to start force-feeding him the ball a little bit more.
Now, as far as Jermaine Ifedi coming back, how much of an effect do you think he's going to have on that offensive line?
I think it can be huge because, I don't know, based on what we saw in the preseason, this offensive line looked magnificent. They were blocking so well for Wilson. He had no pressure on him. He had time to work in the pocket. And then the running lanes for Christian Michael were just huge, kind of like what we saw on Sunday against the Niners. And Jermaine Ifedi was a big part of that. I think he established himself as this really physical presence. Everything we heard coming out of camp was like, oh, my, this kid is something special. And he stood up Michael Bennett on more than one occasion. Now, Michael Bennett is one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. He's definitely the most underpaid. I don't know if he's better than J.J. Watt or Aaron Donald, but he's definitely way, way underpaid as opposed to everyone else who's playing his position. And he plays several positions, too. And now if you can stand up Bennett, then you've got something special going on. I was skeptical of the draft pick, to be honest. I thought that they should have gone after a left tackle. Now Bradley Stoll is struggling. Kind of, he had a good week this week, but again, not much competition. He had a really tough time with Cameron Wake week 1. He had a tough time with Robert Quinn week 2. And I think this coming week he's going to have trouble with the Jets line. But Fetty has looked really, really strong so far. He has a bully mentality that I think is kind of been missing. That's one reason that they like J.R. Sweezy and why the Buccaneers gave him the money they did, is that the Seahawks front line has been missing this kind of bully, kind of dumb, big, just roll you over mentality. It's been Super Bowl 48, so it's nice to get some of that back. And even if it's only 1 out of the 5 guys, having him in there, it may eliminate the biggest problem, which has been Jamarcus Webb at right guard. He's just been totally overwhelmed.
Hey, Tim, the flip side, if you were on the Jets offense, how would you game plan against the Seattle defense?
I think I'd be trying to go deep. I don't think you can do this dink and dunk thing that Tom Brady did in the Super Bowl. I don't think that they have the weapons to consistently do that. I think they need to air it out for Brandon Marshall, who's given the Seahawks trouble in the past. When he's with the Bears, he's had some big games. And he's just that kind of weapon. It doesn't matter if it's Richard Sherman against him. He's going to get his yards. He's going to score some fantasy points. He's just too big and too athletic. It doesn't matter who you put on him. He's going to produce. And Eric Deckers on the other side, he had a huge game on Thursday night last week against the Bills. You can argue those two are maybe the best wide receiver combo in the league. I don't know. I can't think of a better one off the top of my head. Now, you're kind of handicapped because you don't have an A-list quarterback working with them, but those two can definitely – they make up for some of the mistakes that Fitzpatrick does. He's a little bit erratic at times, as we saw last week. How do you throw 6 interceptions? I would say after 5 interceptions, I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to throw another one. I'm going to figure it out. But 6. It blows my mind. It's crazy. But I think he's got to be aggressive. You can't just take these little dink and dunk players. I think they need to throw it downfield to Marshall if they're going to do a thing. And they got to get Forte more involved. I think he's really underrated, and he's graded out really well so far. Bears may really regret not making him an offer because he looks pretty motivated right now, and he's playing really, really well.
Big question for you, Tim, is who wins and why?
I'm gonna stay with my original prediction. When they scheduled the game back in April, I said the Seahawks would lose in a very ugly game. Several factors. First one is it's a 10 a.m. game in Seattle. I don't like getting up at 10 a.m. I grew up in Chicago. I'm a Central Time kind of guy. The game started at noon there, which is I think it's reasonable. 10 a.m., I'm still sleepy just watching the game. When out and playing the game, it actually is a big deal. We had an article a few months ago about how this happens to West Coast teams. Your body doesn't know, it can't make up that kind of time that quickly. They're basically going to be playing on Seattle time, so they're 3 hours behind where the Jets are going to be with their conditioning, and your body is apparently best in the mid-afternoon. That's why the NFL usually plays around that time. But these West Coast teams like the Niners and the Seahawks and the Chargers, when they go to the East Coast and play those 10 a.m. games, they're at a big disadvantage. The Vegas lines, they give you 3 points for those games. Just everything else being equal, it's a 3-point disadvantage, which is huge. And then the Jets defensive line, they kind of get it where the Seahawks are weakest, which is the same thing that happened week 1 and week 2. I think they're built a lot like the Rams. They're going to run the ball well. They're going to get after your quarterback, and a lot of the ways they match up with the Seahawks, it just doesn't go very well. So I think I'm going to call Jets 17, Seahawks 13, really ugly kind of game.
Hey, we want to thank Tim. We want to thank you for coming on. Can you tell people where to read your stuff and find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter all the time at TimWeaver84, and you can find my work at cover32.com/Seahawks.
Tim, I want to thank you again for not just part 1, but part 2, coming back and finishing strong. And we love the partnership, all the above. And it's been a pleasure to work with you this evening on the podcast. And hopefully Lee will be back next week. Hopefully he won't be still celebrating his birthday.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
right.
Tim.
Well, this has been one mighty show that I got to tell you. But we're about to have Bob Condata in the queue, and we're about to hear some highlights from last week's game between the Seahawks and the 49ers. So we're going to play the highlights, and hopefully the next voice that you hear will, well, unfortunately, the next voice you hear after that will probably be mine or Kevin's. But shortly right after that will be our featured guest of the evening, Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
1st and 10 at the 41 of San Francisco. Offset eye this time. The turn in hand to Christian Michael. Has him running with 30, 25, 20. He could go 10, 5. He is in. Touchdown, Seahawks. Christian Michael over the left side. A huge hole, and he goes 41 yards for a touchdown. His first career rushing touchdown. Kristen Michael opens this game with a bang. Wobbly end over end. Lockett's going to have return written on this one from his 11. Cuts forward to the 20, 25, 30. Kicks it outside, left 40. Makes the man miss 50. Down the far sideline. Got one man to beat. Picking up, blocking as he goes. Still one man, and finally he is brought down at the 25-yard line. No flag down. Aaron Burbridge, the last man to beat, finally brings him down, but Tyler Lockett explodes with a huge punt return to put the Seahawks near pay dirt one more time. Doug Baldwin slotted on the right side. Here comes the blitz. Russell scampers out of trouble, looks, throws. Doug Baldwin reaches out. Does he make that catch?
Yes, he does.
Holy smokes! A one-handed catch. A flag is down. Tremaine Brock, the quarterback, calls for the hold. That ball wasn't the most perfect pass, but you don't have to throw a perfect pass when Doug Baldwin's on the receiving end, a 12-yard pickup. Russell out of the shotgun. Kristen Michael. Russell's going to throw again. Has some time, steps up. Now he scrambles left, looks, throws to the end zone. Touchdown! Seahawks! Jimmy Graham in the middle of the defense and the middle of the end zone, wide open. He slams the ball. An 18-yard touchdown reception. And just when it started to look even the least bit bleak, the Seahawks stretch their lead to 20-3.
We now welcome Bob Condotta to the show. Bob covers the Seahawks for the Seattle Times. Bob, thanks for being on with us.
Sure. Thanks for having me. How are you guys doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. So the Seahawks scored 2.5 times more against the 49ers on Sunday than in the first two games combined. Was this just a matter of the 49ers not being good, or did the Seahawks change something schematically?
Well, it's always I think it's always a lot of everything. I think they had a real good plan for this game, especially early on. A couple of things I think they wanted to try to attack, and knowing they unlike the after the Miami game when you're going down to Los Angeles and Russell Wilson was much more hobbled. This week he was much better, until he got hurt again. But for the first 35 minutes of the game, he was sort of able to be pretty much Russell Wilson and do some things. So I think that opened up a lot of things. I think they got Jimmy Graham a lot more involved after he had played a lot against the Rams. They sort of knew he could do that. So I think they really did some things to really specifically get him involved this week. Same deal with, Kristen Michael. Thomas Rawls not practicing all week. They worked all week with Kristen Michael. I think they really put some things together that they knew he would work well at as well. So I think it was a lot of stuff like that. And then obviously I think the 49ers, I think the week one win they had against the Rams may look a little strange as the year goes on. And, Carolina really took it to the 49ers the previous week. So, I think the 49er defense is a little bit more suspect than we thought after the first week of the season.
Hey, Bob, the elephant in the room is Russell Wilson's injury and whether to sit him this week or not. If Wilson is at all able to play, what are the chances that Seattle will chooses not to play him, and should he play?
I think he'll. I think they're going to want to play him if he's healthy at all. If he's anywhere close to healthy, and I think they do think he's pretty healthy. I think he's going to play. I don't feel like they think they're at the stage of the season where they can sort of give up a game. Especially going into the bye. I know you could look at going into the bye and saying, well, let's just get healthy, and even if we're 2-2, that's okay. But I don't know that Pete Carroll's wired that way. I don't think Russell Wilson's wired that way. I think they want to try to win this game, get to 3-1. It's Super Bowl or bust the way they're built right now. And you got Minnesota sitting there at 3-0. Philadelphia at 3-0. The Seahawks have gone to the Super Bowl 3 times. All 3 times they had home field advantage in the playoffs. Nobody thinks that's a coincidence. So I think if Russell's well enough to play, I think they're going to play him. I think they're going to want him out there and get this win and move on. And knowing that you have the bye week to get him healthier. And I don't think they think this is, that serious. I mean, you heard Pete Carroll. It seemed like the more he talked yesterday, the sort of the less serious it seemed like the injury got. By the end he was saying that, look, this is something that a lot of guys play with and all that. So, I think if he's able to play at all anywhere close to even how he did against the Rams, I think they're going to want to put him out there.
Hey, Bob, if for some reason they decide not to play him, or God forbid he gets injured worse during the game, how much faith do you have that Trevon Boykin can lead this team and to a victory?
Well, the faith would be in them being able to put together a plan that could win it with him. They would not call on Boykin to win the game for them, but what they would do is hope that a defense that has really only given up probably 1 touchdown when it mattered this year. Gave up 1 touchdown in the first 11 quarters of the season. That they could hold down a Jets team that is not really firing on all cylinders offensively right now, and kind of do it with defense and running game and go that route. What they would not want him to do is throw an interception like the kind of pass he threw late in that 49ers game. They'd really want him to be careful with the ball and go that route. But I think Russell's going to play. So I think they're going to go. It's as we're sitting here doing this on Tuesday afternoon. They haven't made a move to add a quarterback to the roster or anything like that. I mean, they appear to be going into the work week here with Russell and Trevon Boykin as their quarterbacks on their active roster. So. That leads me to believe they're sort of going into it thinking Russell's going to play. But if it got to Boykin, I think that's what they would do is really lean on the defense to really hold it down and hope that with Christian Michael and the running game and things like that and sort of being really smart with the passing game that you could get enough done to get out of there with the win.
And what are your biggest concerns for the Seahawks facing the Jets this Sunday?
Definitely the match for the offensive line against the Jets defensive line. I thought the offensive line for the Seahawks took a real step forward in the 49ers game, but I think they're going to face a really good defensive front this week in the Jets. Maybe despite all everybody sort of talked about Miami and the Rams, this one might be just as good, if not better. 3 guys really playing well right now for them, and Leonard Williams, Sheldon Richardson, and Muhammad Wilkerson, and those guys are going to be a load. And don't let the score of the game against Kansas City fool you. I mean, that was two touchdowns the Chiefs got on returns of turnovers, and they didn't really move it a whole lot. They had one drive, I think, where they moved it pretty well. But that's a good running team that the Chiefs have, and the Jets held them to about 70-something yards on 23 or 4 carries or whatever. So I don't think it's going to be real easy for the Seahawks to move the ball on the ground necessarily in this game and all that. So that to me is by far the biggest matchup there. And then I would say that the Seattle secondary against the Jets, this could be a game where they really, the Seahawks only have the 1 turnover that they forced all season, and they're playing a team that just lost it 8 times in a game. So that's really going to be the talk all week in New York about the Jets is Ryan Fitzpatrick and the way he was just kind of throwing it up for grabs a lot against the Chiefs. So can the Seahawks force some turnovers or 2 to maybe get an easy score as well and take some pressure off the offense?
Hey, Bob, I want to let you know I'm located in New York, so New York Sports Radio, they're torturing Ryan Fitzpatrick right now out here.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, you throw 6 interceptions in a game. I think that's going to happen anywhere. But, yeah, no doubt, especially in New York.
Yes. So, hey, the Seahawks obviously struggled against talented lines of the Rams and the Dolphins. Jermaine Ifedi, he's a rookie. What's your thoughts on him?
Well, I until we really see him play in regular season games, I think you got to hold off a little bit. But they obviously are very high on him. He had won the starting right guard spot. Held it all throughout training camp, and they really liked the way the two guards in the center, the inside trio, the offensive line had come together. So that says something, no doubt. The evaluation they had made of him, but he will still be a rookie, and who has yet to play in an NFL game, and won't have played in a month in any kind of game. When he gets out there, right now I assume he's going to play some on Sunday, probably start, I guess. So, I probably need to hold off a few weeks to really get that sense. But everything we saw in the preseason was obviously real positive.
That is true. Well, I mentioned earlier in the show that I picked up Christine Michael on my fantasy team because, of course, I'm sitting waiting for Le'Veon Bell to get back in there. He had his best game as a Seahawk, and Thomas Rawls may run the risk of not being healthy all season. Explain what you've seen as the difference between Michael's 3 years ago and this season.
Yeah, well, I think it's 3 years is one of the biggest differences. I think, not being a rookie anymore, being in the league 4 years, I think just the reality, the reality check he had to have after he was traded by the Seahawks, and then even worse, just flat out being let go by Dallas, and then having nobody pick him up really. Washington put him on the practice squad, and that was a Washington team that was being run by a guy that had helped draft him with the Seahawks. So, that was sort of it that he had left. I mean, it was like every other team in the NFL looked at him and said, no thanks. And, then when you get another chance, but from the team that knew you best, where you're comfortable, and they sort of, and they immediately had to throw him into the lineup. I think he's talked a lot about that, just sort of appreciating what he had and understanding a little bit better what you got to do to prepare each week and sort of know what you need to get done and all of that. And, it's never been an issue really of talent or anything for him. It's just been a matter of figuring out how to best use that talent on the field. So no doubt, he was always dependable. He was never a guy who was hurt much. So, that you're right. I mean, Thomas Rawls, unfortunately, has had a few different injuries now during his time with the Seahawks. And he's going to need a little while now to get ready from this one. So they're going to have to roll with Christine Michael for a while, and luckily he appears to be up to that task right now from everything we've seen so far.
Hey, Bob, you mentioned that defensive backfield playing well this year, and one guy's playing a lot better than he did last year is Cam Chancellor. We could probably say he didn't really have a great season last year, but why do you think he's better this season so far?
Because he had training camp. I think that matters. He was there for 2 months this year when he wasn't last year. I think it's as simple as that. I think when you come in the third week of the season and you haven't been and you haven't really done anything football related for months, I think it's sort of hard to get thrown right back into it. And it was also a little bit of a different emotional situation when he did come back. He obviously had held out for a reason. He was hoping to get a new contract from the Seahawks, and the Seahawks said no, and so there was sort of a public loss there that he had to take, and win back walk into a little bit of a tense situation with some of his teammates who I don't think were real happy that he had held out. So this year there's none of that. He's been around from day one, and everybody's put all that in the past, and I think it helped when he got the assurance from the team early on as well that he was going to be part of the team this year. Part of the reason Chancellor held out was he didn't know he'd be part of the team this year. This was the season where he entered the non-guaranteed money part of his contract, and when the team told him early on, you don't have to worry about that. You're going to be part of it. You're going to get your $7 million or whatever it is he's making this year. I think that put a lot of things to rest for him as well.
Now, on his holdout last year, I know it was the main focus was contract negotiation. He wanted more money, but there was a couple people that speculated that he had an injury. What's your take on that?
I don't think so. No, I never heard that. The last practice that we saw the Seahawks do before he decided to hold out, he was totally fine. So Cam's always denied that. The team's denied that. So I've never heard that. And it wasn't just more money. It was also just sort of guaranteed. He had gone past all the guaranteed part of his money. He had had a couple of injuries the previous year that I don't think were factors then. But I mean, the Super Bowl, obviously, he'd had some. I think just reality checks of understanding that you're getting your years are building a little bit in your career. So I think he just wanted some assurance from the team in that regard. So if you could have gotten a contract where you get a little bit more money and you also just get some guaranteed money as well that for sure you're going to get. I think that was part of it. But I don't buy the injury thing at all.
Okay, cool. And how is this team playing so far compared to where you thought they might be, or what you thought they might do before the season started?
Well, the defense has been great. I mean, I think the defense has maybe even been a little bit better than I thought it might be. You had a little bit of question about the middle of the defensive line maybe and how that was all going to come together, and but Jaron Reed I think has played well, and bringing back Tony McDaniel helped solve a question there and things like that. So. I think the defense has been right on point. The offense is hard to judge because basically from early third quarter of the Miami game, you've been dealing with injuries either to Russell or to Thomas Rawls, or in the Rams game, both Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett and things like that. Bringing Jimmy Graham sort of slowly back into it the first week anyway. So I think it'll be much fairer to judge, and Ifedi obviously, as we were discussing earlier. So. I think it'll be much fairer to judge the offense in a few weeks when you sort of get the offense as they envisioned it out there and with everybody healthy. And even if you don't have Rawls, but if you at least have Michael and if Russell's healthy and you sort of get the line back the way you wanted it. I think it's really hard to judge the offense yet totally. But I thought the first half and first couple first series of the third quarter maybe were really good signs.
Right on, Bob. We appreciate you being on. Hopefully you'll come on with us again. And our earlier guest, I asked him where he could be found on social media. He said he was not on social media. I know you are because I follow you on Twitter. And we know we can read you in the Seattle Times. But where can people find you on social media?
At B Condotta. So that's BCONDOTTA. That's where you can find me on Twitter, and I usually link all of our stories, and on I think on my Twitter page is a link to our website where you can find all of our Seahawks coverage as well.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Great, thanks. All right. Anytime. Thank you. All right. Bye.
It was Bob Condotta. I want to thank him. Kev, I want to thank you for allowing me to sit in Lee Val's chair this week. I
appreciate you doing it, man.
Hey, anytime. Like I said, we're all brothers here on Happy Hour Network, and I appreciate the opportunity because, like I said, I love listening to the show. Also, from time to time, I'll call in. Not too often, but I kind of like more just to listen to the show and take it from there. So, tell us about the next show.
Well, our next show will be same time, same place, same just a different day, same day of the week. It'll be next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And we hope everybody tunes in, and we'll have another really big show. Hopefully Lee will be back. And not that Ted wasn't great. Ted, I appreciate you being on too and filling in for Lee. It was good. It's nice to have a fun to have a perspective on the fan of the team we're playing this week. It's kind of a new approach.
I'm telling you, it's like that, and the fact that I'm a homer. It's kind of like you guys are homers for the Seahawks, kind of like I'm a homer for the Jets, and it's it just adds a different layer to it. So it was really great. And I'll leave it there. And I think you're going to do our best and close us out.
Right on. Go Hawks.
1st and 10 at the 41 of San Francisco. Offset eye this time. The turn in hand to Christian Michael. Has him running with 30, 25, 20. He could go 10, 5. He is in. Touchdown, Seahawks. Christian Michael over the left side a huge hole, and he goes 41 yards for a touchdown, his first career rushing touchdown. Kristen Michael opens this game with a bang. Wobbly end over end. Lockett's going to have return written on this one from his 11. Cuts forward to the 20, 25, 30. Kicks it outside, last 40. Makes the man miss 50. Down the far sideline. Got one man to beat. Picking up, blocking as he goes. Still one man, and finally he is brought down at the 25-yard line. No flags down. Aaron Burbridge, the last man to beat, finally brings him down, but Tyler Lockett explodes with a huge punt return to put the Seahawks near pay dirt one more time. Doug Baldwin slotted on the right side. Here comes the blitz. Russell scampers out of trouble, looks, throws. Doug Baldwin reaches out. Does he make that catch?
Yes, he does.
Holy smokes! A one-handed catch. A flag is down. Tremaine Brock, the cornerback, calls for the hold. That ball wasn't the most perfect pass, but you don't have to throw a perfect pass when Doug Baldwin's on the receiving end, a 12-yard pickup. Russell out of the shotgun. Kristen Michael. Russell's going to throw again. Has some time, steps up. Now he scrambles left, looks, throws to the end zone. Touchdown! Seahawks! Jimmy Graham in the middle of the defense and the middle of the end zone, wide open. He slams the ball. An 18-yard touchdown reception. And just when it started to look even the least bit bleak, the Seahawks stretch their lead to 20-3.
When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can seem intense. Like breakup R&B intense.
I thought you said you loved the sweater that I got you. If you didn't, you could have told me.
Geico makes it easy. Just go to Geico.com anytime to update or check your policy without all the extra drama.
I even had a gift receipt.